Virgin girl caught fiancé with her best friend, so she signs a marriage contract with a billionaire. The rare sound of silence filled the air for just a moment as the first blush of dawn lit the sky over New York City. Emma Turner rubbed her stiff neck, standing in front of a luxury apartment building nestled in the Upper East Side. Her gaze lifted to a window above, where a dim light flickered faintly. Despite the exhaustion weighing on her, Emma felt a flicker of joy. Just a week ago, her fiancé had agreed to accompany her to New Haven to help select her wedding gown, a moment she'd long dreamed of. But when an emergency surgery had pulled her back to the hospital, Emma had no choice but to cancel their plans. Peter hadn't taken it well. He had simply hung up on her in disappointment. He wouldn't be expecting her this morning. The surgery had been pushed forward unexpectedly, and though she hadn't slept a moment since last night, Emma didn't think twice before hailing a cab straight to his apartment. She wanted to surprise him. Her heart was light with anticipation. Quietly, she let herself into the apartment, careful not to wake him. But the moment she stepped inside, an eerie tension gripped her. Something felt wrong. From the cracked open bedroom door, soft moaning filtered through the air. "Be more gentle. You said you wanted me to go fast. What do you want?" "More." Emma froze. She wasn't naive. She was a doctor, trained to read subtle signs, tones, silences, pauses, and she recognized this all too well. Her pulse pounded in her ears as the ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Number. This can't be happening. She willed herself to remain composed, to find a rational explanation. Maybe Peter had lent his apartment to a friend. Yes, that had to be it. But the illusion shattered the moment she looked inside. There, tangled beneath the silk sheets, were two bodies. One of them was her fiancé, Peter Grant. The other, wrapped around him like a serpent, was her best friend, Alicia Myers. Alicia, the woman Emma had trusted more than anyone else. Her chest tightened as she stared, unable to comprehend the scene before her. She and Peter had been in love for 3 years. Their wedding date was set. He had promised to love her forever. Was this what he meant? Emma's trembling hands dropped the coat she had brought, perhaps to cover him, perhaps just to bring warmth, and it crumpled silently on the marble tiles. Alicia was the first to notice. She gasped and shoved Peter away. "Peter, Emma's here." Peter turned his head, startled to see the woman he had wronged standing motionless in the doorway. "Emma, I thought you were in surgery. Why are you here?" A bitter laugh caught in her throat. "Right. I should be performing surgery." Instead, she had walked into the operating room of her own heartbreak. He thought she'd be too busy to catch him. That's why he dared. Emma's eyes locked on Alicia. "Tell me, Alicia, have I ever wronged you? Why would you sleep with my fiancé? How long has this been going on?" Alicia shrank into the sheets, hugging herself. "Emma, it's not what you think. It's all my fault. But before Alicia could finish, Emma let out a sound, caught somewhere between a scream and a sob, and stormed from the room, her hand knocking a glass lamp to the floor. The sound shattered the quiet like a gunshot. "Emma! Emma!" Peter stumbled out of bed and chased after her, panic creeping into his voice. He scowled at the broken lamp on the floor. "Emma, I couldn't help it. We've been together for 3 years, and all we've done is kiss. I'm a man. I have needs." She laughed, cold, sharp, bitter. "So that's your excuse? You had needs, so you betrayed me. With her?" Her rage boiled over. She grabbed another decorative piece and flung it to the ground. Porcelain shattered. Peter reached out to stop her, but she slapped him. Hard. The crack echoed in the space like thunder. Peter, eldest son of a powerful family, born with privilege, adored and untouchable, stood frozen. No one had ever dared raise a hand to him before. His stunned expression darkened. He grabbed her wrist roughly. "You've gone too far, Emma." She stared him down, eyes blazing. "No, you went too far, Peter." She yanked her hand free and bolted out of the apartment. Around the corner of the block, a sleek black Audi pulled slowly out from the shadows. Seated in the back was a man cloaked in an air of quiet menace. Even sitting, he radiated dominance. At least 6'2", broad-shouldered and perfectly postured, dressed in a tailored black suit that emphasized every inch of his powerful frame. Curls of dark brown hair framed a face sculpted with elegance and edge, but it was his eyes, bottomless, unreadable, that followed the fleeing figure of the young woman dashing across the sidewalk. His expression remained impassive, but something flickered deep within. He had seen all he needed to see. This was the moment he'd orchestrated. The betrayal, the heartbreak, every detail had been laid out by him. He had known about Peter and Alicia long ago. He had simply waited for the perfect moment for Emma to discover the truth. This was justice, and he should have been satisfied. But instead, he felt empty. From the driver's seat, a man turned and spoke quietly. "Mr. Aiden, she's gone." From the look on her face, everything went exactly according to plan. "Shall we leave now?" Silence. Aiden didn't answer. The back seat of the car was a void, heavy, waiting. After a long pause, his voice broke through the stillness, low and husky. "Follow her." "Yes, sir." The black Audi slipped silently into motion, like a phantom cloaked in the city's shadows. Emma stumbled through the streets of Manhattan, her vision blurred with tears. Her world, the life she thought was certain, was crumbling around her. The sobs came unbidden, cascading like waterfalls down her cheeks. Emma gasped for air, her lungs burning as she stumbled onto the sidewalk, grief clouding every step. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, that warning she'd dismissed so easily. "One day, your heart will pay for what your eyes refuse to see." Would she say, "I told you so" now? Her mother had raised her alone. Through hardship, loneliness, and tireless struggle, it had always been the two of them, Emma and her mother, side by side against the world. When Emma met Peter shortly after landing her job at NYC Health, she had been swept up in the whirlwind. Her mother had never approved. "He's not from our world," she had warned, "and one day that difference will matter." Emma hadn't listened. She had chosen Peter so completely, so recklessly, that she had cut off nearly all contact with the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. For 3 years, Emma had barely spoken to her mother. She had missed birthdays, ignored late-night phone calls, and saved every ounce of energy and every vacation day for a wedding that would now never come. All for what? For this? Emma let out a strangled laugh as hot tears streamed down her cheeks. "Your entire life is a tragedy," she whispered bitterly to herself. Her palm met her cheek in a sharp slap, hoping, futilely, that physical pain might distract her from the roaring storm inside her chest. But it didn't. It couldn't. A sudden screech of tires ripped through the air. Emma, halfway across a busy intersection, blinked just in time to see a car barreling toward her. Her body refused to respond, paralyzed, empty, drained. Then, "Emma!" The voice cut through the chaos like lightning. She turned her head, just as a sharp pain jolted up her right arm. Then, darkness. Emma groaned softly as she blinked against harsh fluorescent light. Her head throbbed, and her entire body ached, but the worst pain radiated from her right hand. A white ceiling swam into view. "You're awake," a nurse said gently, leaning over her. "You've been unconscious for a day." Emma turned her head slowly, confusion swirling in her eyes. Hospital, bed, IV drip. Everything was a blur. Then it hit her. She had been hit by a car. She had been crossing the street, and someone had called her name. Who had called her name? Was it Peter? She tried to push herself upright, but the instant she put pressure on her right hand, a searing pain shot through her. "Please don't move," the nurse urged quickly, steadying her. "You've broken your right arm and hand. You just came out of surgery." Emma stared down at her arm, now wrapped in thick bandages. Numbness seeped into her bones. A surgeon's hands are their most valuable tools, and hers were broken. She said nothing, just stared. Her mind spiraled into a black void as grief and shock blended into one deep, bottomless ache. The nurse, after checking her vitals and murmuring reassurances, finally stepped out, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts. Her phone rang. Mechanically, Emma reached for it, wincing as she used her left hand. It was a call from the hospital, her workplace, her sanctuary, the institution where she had built her reputation from nothing. "Dr. Turner," came the cold voice on the other end. "A patient you operated on developed severe post-op complications. His condition deteriorated. Your medical license has been suspended pending investigation. We're required to terminate your employment effective immediately. Please come in to finalize the paperwork. Also, your insurance won't cover the full settlement. You'll need to personally compensate the family." The line went dead before Emma could reply. She stared at the screen, her whole body trembling. She couldn't even cry. There was nothing left. A single surgical complication, something any surgeon might face, was now being placed solely on her shoulders. Her career, her reputation, her identity as Dr. Turner, gone, stripped away in a single phone call. She sat in silence until the nurse returned with a dinner tray. "Miss Turner, it's time for your meal." Emma almost corrected her. Dr. Turner. But the title stuck in her throat like ash. She glanced down at the tray. The food was better than standard hospital fare. The room was private, spotless, and she had clearly been given extra attention. This wasn't the work of chance. Peter. He must have arranged all this. The thought made her stomach twist. "Nurse," she said quietly, "I'd like to be transferred to a standard ward, and I'll pay my own expenses." The nurse blinked, clearly surprised. "Miss Turner, your care is already covered. I don't have the authority to—" "Then I want to be discharged." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "I'll speak to the doctor on call." Emma leaned back against the pillows, her gaze drifting to the window. Twilight had painted the city in hues of blood red and violet. The sun hovered over the skyline, clinging to the horizon like someone too afraid to let go, just like her. In one single day, Emma had lost everything: her fiancé, her best friend, her career, and the hands she had built her future with. A faint voice whispered outside her door. "Mr. Grant, Miss Turner wants to be transferred to a standard room. She also said she'll pay her own hospital fees." "Don't move her." "Yes, understood." Before Emma could rise to confront him, her phone rang again. Her mother. Her hand trembled as she picked up. "Mom?" A stranger's voice answered. "Emma, it's Wendy, from next door. Your mom had a heart attack. She's been taken to North Central Bronx. She's in the ER right now." Emma stopped hearing the rest. The only thing she could comprehend was heart attack, emergency, and mom. She sprang out of bed, ignoring the pain, grabbed her bag, and ran, out of the room, out of the hospital, into the darkening world that was falling apart around her. "Miss Turner, where are you going?" The nurse's voice echoed sharply down the hallway as she hurried after Emma. But Emma didn't stop. She couldn't. The ringing in her ears drowned everything else out. Her mother was in the emergency room. Nothing else mattered. The commotion drew the attention of those nearby. Just outside the hospital doors, Chris Hernandez was pushing Aidan Grant's wheelchair when the two men caught sight of her. Emma ran right past them, her hospital gown fluttering behind her like the torn remnants of her former life. Only when the cold night air bit at her exposed skin did she pause, reality catching up in the form of shivers crawling across her arms. The wind howled down the street, sharp and unforgiving. She wrapped her arms around herself, waiting desperately for a taxi. Her fingers were numb, trembling as they grasped her phone, waiting for a signal or a ride, anything to carry her to her mother. Then she spotted him, Aidan Grant, sitting alone outside the hospital's main entrance, waiting in his wheelchair as Chris went to retrieve the car. The last time Emma had seen Peter's older brother had been during family events, rare, uncomfortable encounters, filled with polite nods and careful distance. Aidan had always seemed distant, unreachable. Why was he here at this hour? Her gaze drifted to his legs, quickly piecing together that his visit must have had something to do with his condition. Aidan's piercing gaze met hers for the briefest moment. He offered a subtle nod, acknowledging her, but nothing more. Just then, Chris pulled the sleek black Audi to the curb and stepped out. "Dr. Turner," he greeted her warmly, holding the car door open for his employer. Emma hesitated, then, compelled by desperation, she walked toward them. "Aidan, may I ask a favor?" Aidan's dark eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you want?" His voice was cool, detached. The wind whipped through her clothes, slicing through what little warmth remained. She swallowed. "Could you give me a ride?" The words felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter in her throat. She immediately regretted asking. Why would he help her? The entire Grant family probably knew about her humiliating breakup with Peter by now. Why would Aidan, the coldest among them, do her any kindness? But to her shock, he gave a brief nod. "Open the door, Chris." Emma instinctively stepped back, thinking he meant for himself. Chris opened the passenger side door, but then turned toward her with an unexpected gesture. "Dr. Turner, Mr. Grant would like you to get in the car." "Oh, thank you." Caught off guard, Emma offered a quick nod and opened the back door, assuming Aidan would prefer the front. Chris hesitated. "Dr. Turner, you—" But Aidan cut him off. "Chris, help me in." Chris said no more. With a practiced motion, he braced the wheelchair while Aidan gripped the armrests and pushed himself upright. Without so much as a wince, he slid into the back seat beside Emma. She hadn't realized it was his seat. Only when his shoulder brushed hers did she finally look up and caught the faintest trace of surprise on Aidan's face. Her breath hitched as memories surfaced, of 3 years ago, the Grant family estate, the backyard garden, the moment he had slipped from his chair, and she had been the one to rush forward and help him. Their eyes met. Emma jolted and scooted to the other side, her cheeks flushing as she looked away. "I'm sorry," she muttered. "I wasn't paying attention." "Pardon me," Aidan replied coolly, as if nothing had happened, but his gaze lingered on her for just a second longer. Chris, oblivious to the sudden tension inside the car, folded the wheelchair and tucked it neatly into the trunk. Moments later, they were on the road, heading north toward the Bronx. Emma leaned against the cold window, her mind spinning. Her thoughts returned to her mother, to the fear gripping her chest. She didn't notice the slight movement beside her, until something soft and warm landed gently across her lap. A tailored, dark jacket. She looked down, startled. "Oh, you don't need to. I'm not that cold." "Put it on," Aidan said, frowning, voice firm. The warmth of the jacket was jarring in contrast to the chill in her bones. She didn't protest again. Chris, watching them quietly through the rearview mirror, arched an eyebrow, but said nothing. His employer's behavior today was strange. By the time they reached North Central Bronx Hospital, Emma barely had time to thank Aidan. She jumped out of the car and rushed through the emergency entrance without looking back. Mr. Aiden, it's late. Should we head back now? Chris asked softly. Follow her in, Aiden murmured. In the hallway outside the ER, Emma sat slumped in a plastic chair, eyes fixed blankly on the closed door ahead. Doctors moved past her in a blur of scrubs and clipboards. A nurse paused beside her. Emma, just a few more minutes. You'll be able to see your mother soon. Emma didn't answer. Then the door opened. A doctor stepped out, looking tired but not grim. Emma sprang to her feet. Doctor, how is my mother? She suffered a cardiac episode, likely days in the making. Stress and emotional strain pushed it over the edge. But she was brought in just in time. She's stable for now. Emma let out a shaky breath. Thank God. But, he continued, her heart is severely damaged. She'll need surgery soon. Yes, of course. Please schedule it right away. We'll need insurance approval first, the doctor said, apologetic. Now that her condition is stable, it's technically no longer an emergency. We'll arrange a consultation. Emma nodded, though the words barely made sense anymore. The nurse guided her to the billing counter. The clerk behind the desk typed quickly, then looked up. After insurance, the amount due now for Nancy Turner is $4,000. How would you like to pay? Emma pulled her credit card from her coat pocket and handed it over. The clerk swiped it once, then again, a third time. Finally, he looked up with a gentle but firm expression. I'm sorry, it's being declined. Emma felt her entire body flush with quiet panic. Emma's voice cracked slightly as she addressed the billing clerk. Can I set up a payment plan? The clerk gave her a measured glance, then began entering details into the system. Emma sat down nearby, her posture stiff, eyes glassy with exhaustion. She stared at her mother through the glass panel, still unconscious under the pale wash of hospital lighting. The doctor had said Nancy Turner had long been at risk for heart complications, stress, lifestyle, genetics. But as her daughter, Emma hadn't known. Not a single clue. What kind of daughter doesn't notice her mother's deteriorating health? She felt like a failure, both as a daughter and as a doctor. Worse still, she knew her mother had no savings to cover an invasive heart procedure. And Emma's own finances were a house of cards. Her salary as a neurosurgeon had once seemed sufficient, even generous. But during the years she'd been with Peter, she had worked herself into a financial hole trying to keep up with his lifestyle, while fiercely protecting her pride. She had never once let his family think she was with him for money. She paid for her own designer clothes, often buying Peter gifts that cost her an entire paycheck. She'd insisted they split every bill, never asked for a cent, never wanted pity. And now her savings were gone. Her private hospital room, her mother's ER visit, she had paid for them both. Now there was nothing left. A soft rustle pulled her back from her thoughts. Mum, she whispered. Nancy Turner stirred. Slowly, her eyes opened, and she blinked weakly at her daughter's face. Emma immediately stood, smoothing her coat and forcing a smile. You're awake, she said, gently brushing a hand over her mother's hair. Nancy's gaze fell to the bandaged arm cradled at Emma's side. Emma, what happened to your arm? Emma hesitated, then offered a breezy lie. Oh, it's nothing. I dislocated it a little. Clumsy me. You dislocated it? Nancy frowned. Emma, you're a neurosurgeon. Your hands. Your career? I know, Mom. Emma interrupted softly, taking her mother's hand. I'm fine. Nancy's reprimand softened into a familiar, loving sigh. I've missed you, she said. Even when I was furious with you, I missed you. Tears stung Emma's eyes. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. Nancy gave a weak smile. It was my fault too. I was stubborn. I just wanted better for you. But if you truly loved him, and if you were happy, I would have supported you. The apology, 3 years overdue, was a balm Emma didn't know she needed. She lowered her head and hugged her mother tightly, her tears soaking into the hospital gown. After Nancy dozed off again, Emma slipped quietly out into the hallway. She sat on a nearby bench, hugging herself for warmth. Then before her appeared a polished pair of Italian leather shoes. She looked up and froze. Aidan Grant. He was seated across from her, unreadable in expression, as if he had been waiting all along. Only then did Emma remember. She was still wearing his coat. Startled, she rose and shrugged it off, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. The fabric was wrinkled from where she had slept in it. "I'll wash it and return it tomorrow," she offered, voice flustered. But Aidan didn't acknowledge the coat. Instead, his voice came cool and deliberate. "I can provide your mother with the best treatment and restore your hand to the way it was." The words struck like a blade, gentle in tone, brutal in implication. Emma's breath caught in her chest. He knew about everything. He had investigated her, or had someone do it for him. Her mother's condition, her finances, her shattered hand. All of it. She steadied herself. "Sir, you must be joking." Aidan tilted his head slightly, saying nothing. Emma knew better. In his world, nothing was done without purpose, and certainly not for free. She whispered, "I can't afford to play games like yours." "If you change your mind," he said, his voice returning to its cold, businesslike edge. "Contact Chris." Chris, standing quietly beside him, produced a simple white business card and handed it to her. Without another word, he turned Aidan's wheelchair and wheeled him away. Emma stood there, the card trembling in her fingers, as the hallway lights flickered above her. Her knees gave way, and she sank to the ground, her shadow stretched and lonely in the sterile glow. The next morning, alarms shrieked from her mother's room. "Code Blue!" Doctors and nurses stormed into the ward. A nurse pushed Emma back from the door, and she stood frozen, helpless, in the waiting area, staring at the sealed doors. Just hours ago, she had sat with her mother, sharing breakfast. Now she couldn't even wake her. "It will be fine. It has to be fine," she repeated like a prayer. After what felt like an eternity, the attending physician stepped out. "Doctor, how is my mother?" "Ms. Turner, her condition worsened suddenly. We're prepping for surgery now. Don't worry, her insurance will cover it. We'll deal with billing later." He walked off before she could respond. Emma pressed her trembling hands to her mouth. She knew how hospitals worked. You knew how quickly fees piled up, how easily medical debt could swallow lives whole. Back in her mother's room, she watched the rhythmic rise and fall of Nancy's chest beneath the oxygen mask. Machines beeped, lights flashed. Emma turned and left. She pulled out the card. "Is this Christopher?" she said, her voice low. "It's Emma. I want to speak to Aidan." She arrived at the address Chris gave her right on time. It was close to Peter's old apartment. Too close. But she forced herself to walk up the steps. One breath, then another. She pressed the doorbell. Chris opened the door and greeted her with a slight bow. "Dr. Turner, thank you for coming." "It's fine, I'm the one asking for help," she said quietly. She followed him through a sleek masculine living room, steel grey furniture, minimalist design, perfectly polished. It suited Aidan's aura to the last detail. Sharp, cold, unyielding. Chris led her to a private study, then stepped aside and left. Emma stepped in and paused. Aidan sat behind an enormous desk, absorbed in paperwork, his profile shadowed beneath soft morning light. He didn't acknowledge her right away. He looked paler than usual. A thick blanket was draped over his shoulders. He coughed suddenly, harsh, dry, tired. Emma stepped forward. "Aidan, are you ill?" He looked up. "You're here." Emma folded her hands. Can you really help my mother and my hand? Her voice was steady but strained. We can sign a contract. He closed the file in front of him and looked her directly in the eye. I'll do everything I promised. Emma held his gaze. Then tell me your conditions. He didn't hesitate. Let's get married. The words were delivered with the same casual tone one might use to suggest dinner reservations. Emma's mind went blank. Married? He met her shock with calm indifference. What? Don't want to agree? There was a touch of dry sarcasm in his tone, an edge that cut. Emma stared at him, struggling to process. Why me? She asked softly. You could marry anyone. Even with your condition, there are women who would line up. You know that. Her voice faltered. I was Peter's fiancé just days ago. Aidan looked away briefly, his expression unreadable. That's none of your business. Right, of course. She was the one asking for help. Only a few days ago, Aidan's tone would have seemed purely calculated. But now, as he glanced away and replied flatly, That is none of your business, there was a flicker of discomfort behind his cool demeanor. Emma lowered her eyes. Right, she was the one asking for help. She had no place questioning his reasons. Fine, she said simply. Aidan studied her face for a beat longer than necessary. For some reason, her quiet acceptance bothered him. He told himself it was the fever clouding his judgment, that this was all part of the plan. Chris will handle your mother's arrangements, he said at last, then raised his voice. Chris, send our guest out. The door opened. Chris entered, holding a porcelain cup. Mr. Aidan, it's time for your... Aidan cut him off with a sharp glare. Chris blinked innocently, set the medicine on the desk, and turned to Emma. Doctor, Turner, after you. Emma rose and left the apartment in a daze. As she stepped outside, the screech of tires jolted her attention. A Lamborghini had stopped abruptly across the street. Its driver leaned out of the window, shouting at a pedestrian. Are you blind? Watch where you're going! The voice was unmistakable. Emma turned to see Alicia behind the wheel, dressed in designer from head to toe, her face twisted in irritation. The second Alicia saw Emma standing there, her expression darkened. She assumed Emma must have come looking for Peter. Her voice sharpened like a blade. You really are pathetic, still chasing him around like a stray? A group of bystanders who had already turned to see the traffic dispute now paused to watch the scene unfold. Two women, one love triangle. The tension hung thick in the humid city air. Emma didn't flinch. Alicia, you're the one who slept with someone else's fiancé. Just who's pathetic? Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. Heads swiveled, sympathy shifted. Alicia's cheeks drained of color. She had never expected Emma to announce the betrayal publicly. Right outside Peter's residence, no less. But Emma wasn't done. You can have Peter, she said coldly. Thanks for picking up the trash I threw away. With that she turned and walked away, tears welling but unshed, her spine straight and her steps steady. She wouldn't be the same woman ever again. By the time Emma returned to North Central Bronx, she was surprised to find that her mother had been moved from the general ward to a private suite, complete with full medical staff and state-of-the-art equipment. Inside, several cardiac specialists stood gathered around Nancy Turner's chart, discussing treatment options. One of the attending doctors saw Emma and approached with a respectful nod. Miss Turner, you're back. We're consulting with some of the top cardiologists in the country. Once we finalize the plan, we'll proceed. Emma nodded. Thank you. She understood the unspoken truth behind their sudden attentiveness. Aidan. She'd chosen this path. There was no turning back now. Once the room quieted and the nurses withdrew, Emma sat by her mother's bedside. The soft beep of the cardiac monitor was the only sound. Her mother lay still, an oxygen mask covering her face, but the monitor showed a steady rhythm. Emma gently lifted Nancy's hand and held it against her cheek, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Mom, did you hear the doctor? Once you're fully stable, you can have the surgery. You're going to be okay." Fatigue tugged at her, and at some point, she drifted off beside the bed. She woke to a soft knock on the door. Gently placing her mother's hand under the blanket, Emma stood and opened it. Chris stood outside holding a folder. "Dr. Turner, Mr. Aiden asked me to deliver the contract." Emma's expression darkened slightly, but she stepped into the hallway and led Chris to the visitors' lounge nearby. Chris placed the contract in her hands. "Here's a copy for your review. If there's anything you'd like to amend, please let us know." Emma looked at the neatly prepared prenuptial agreement. It was unmistakably drawn up by a high-profile legal team. Professional, detailed, final. As she read through it, she realized something strange. Every term favored her. Her financial safety, personal autonomy, even her mother's treatment were guaranteed. Except one clause. The marriage could only be dissolved at Aiden's discretion. Emma's lips curled faintly. Was she really surprised? A contractual marriage with a cold billionaire? What had she expected? Still, when her eyes landed on the signature line, Aiden Grant, she hesitated for just a heartbeat. Then she scrawled her name next to his. Emma Turner. It was done. There was no going back now. Chris carefully retrieved one copy of the document and looked at her arm. "Dr. Turner, your mother's care is fully arranged. Once her condition stabilizes, surgery will proceed. Also, a specialist will evaluate your injury later today. Please cooperate with them." Emma glanced at her cast, then nodded. "I will." Chris bowed politely. "If you need anything, you know how to reach me." "Thank you." Emma returned to her mother's room and slipped her signed copy of the agreement into the drawer beside the bed. Her heart ached. If Mum finds out about this, she'll never forgive me. Not long after, Nancy stirred. Her eyes widened in confusion as she looked around the private suite. "Emma, why was I moved?" Emma leaned over, gently tucking the blanket around her. "Don't worry, Mum. My fiancé arranged it for you." She didn't mention that the man in question was no longer Peter. Nancy frowned, her voice thin. "This must be expensive." Emma forced a smile. "It's all taken care of. Mum, it's just a small gift from him. Don't worry about the cost." Emma smiled gently as she tucked the blanket around her mother. Nancy glanced away, still looking uncertain, but she said nothing more. That evening, a nurse guided Emma down to the orthopedics ward for a follow-up on her arm. The doctor was optimistic, no signs of worsening, and the latest round of medication had eased the lingering numbness in her fingers. Meanwhile, Nancy's vitals had stabilized, and her heart surgery was officially scheduled for 2 days later. During breakfast the next morning, Nancy hesitated, stirring her oatmeal slowly. "Emma, how's work going?" Emma paused for a fraction too long, then lowered her gaze. "It's fine, Mom. I've just taken a little time off to rest because of my arm." It wasn't a complete lie, but it wasn't the truth either. She couldn't bring herself to say that her medical license had been suspended and her position revoked. Her mother had enough to worry about. Nancy's eyes lingered on her, then she simply nodded. "Good. You've been working too hard. Take this time to breathe a little." Emma sighed inwardly with relief, but then, "Bring him to visit me sometime," Nancy added softly. "When you're both free." Emma froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Her heartbeat skipped. Him. Her mother still thought she was engaged to Peter. Before she could even begin crafting a response, her phone vibrated, saved by the bell. "Sorry, Mom, I need to take this." She stepped into the hallway and answered. "Hello, it's Emma." "Dr. Turner," Chris said on the other end. Mr. Aiden asked me to pick you up. Please be ready. Pick her up? Emma blinked, then realized it must be time to finalize the arrangement. Maybe he wanted her to move into a residence he'd arranged. All right, she replied, after a brief pause. Back in her mother's room, she gently explained that she had an errand to run and would be back soon. Then she grabbed her bag and left. Outside, Chris's car was already waiting. In the back seat, Aiden appeared half asleep, his head tilted slightly, dark circles beneath his eyes. It was clear he hadn't rested well. Good morning, Emma said softly. He gave a small, wordless nod. The ride from North Central Bronx to downtown was quiet. When the car stopped, Emma looked out the window and was stunned. The courthouse? Mom, it's just a small gift from him. Don't worry about the cost. Emma smiled gently as she tucked the blanket around her mother. Nancy glanced away, still looking uncertain, but she said nothing more. That evening, a nurse guided Emma down to the orthopedics ward for a follow-up on her arm. The doctor was optimistic, no signs of worsening, and the latest round of medication had eased the lingering numbness in her fingers. Meanwhile, Nancy's vitals had stabilized, and her heart surgery was officially scheduled for 2 days later. During breakfast the next morning, Nancy hesitated, stirring her oatmeal slowly. Emma, how's work going? Emma paused for a fraction too long, then lowered her gaze. It's fine, Mom. I've just taken a little time off to rest because of my arm. It wasn't a complete lie, but it wasn't the truth either. She couldn't bring herself to say that her medical license had been suspended and her position revoked. Her mother had enough to worry about. Nancy's eyes lingered on her, then she simply nodded. Good. You've been working too hard. Take this time to breathe a little. Emma sighed inwardly with relief, but then, bring him to visit me sometime, Nancy added softly. When you're both free. Emma froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Her heartbeat skipped. Him. Her mother still thought she was engaged to Peter. Before she could even begin crafting a response, her phone vibrated, saved by the bell. Sorry, Mom, I need to take this. She stepped into the hallway and answered. Hello, it's Emma. Dr. Turner, Chris said on the other end. Mr. Aiden asked me to pick you up. Please be ready. Pick her up? Emma blinked, then realized it must be time to finalize the arrangement. Maybe he wanted her to move into a residence he had arranged. All right, she replied, after a brief pause. Back in her mother's room, she gently explained that she had an errand to run and would be back soon. Then she grabbed her bag and left. Outside, Chris's car was already waiting. In the back seat, Aiden appeared half asleep, his head tilted slightly, dark circles beneath his eyes. It was clear he hadn't rested well. Good morning, Emma said softly. He gave a small, wordless nod. The ride from North Central Bronx to downtown was quiet. When the car stopped, Emma looked out the window and was stunned. The courthouse? Her eyes shifted to Aiden. He had just opened his eyes, as if waking from a dream. Chris stepped out, retrieved the wheelchair, and helped Aiden exit the vehicle with practiced ease. Emma followed, her brows furrowed with unanswered questions. Inside the building, they approached the clerk's counter. A pair of forms were handed over. Emma stared down at the paper in her hands. Marriage license application. The moment felt surreal. She had pictured herself at the courthouse many times, but always with Peter. She never imagined standing here next to his older brother. Still, she filled out her portion, her name steady and clear on the form. Emma Turner. She didn't look at Aiden as they waited for the judge. They stood in still silence, a quiet pair among a sea of affectionate couples, smiling brides, hand-holding grooms, laughter, and whispered promises. They didn't belong in this room, and yet they were about to leave it married. The judge soon called them forward, processed the paperwork, and stamped their license with practiced efficiency. "Congratulations," the judge said, handing them their certificate. "Best of luck to you both." Outside the courtroom, Aidan gestured toward a small photo booth set up in the hallway. It was decorated with white lace and paper flowers, a cheerful place where newlyweds posed for keepsakes. Emma blinked. He wanted wedding photos? Chris wheeled Aidan forward, but before he could get far, Emma stepped in. "Let me," she said, moving to the back of the chair. Chris glanced at Aidan, who gave a subtle nod. They positioned themselves in front of the white backdrop, seated side by side like two students awaiting a lecture. The photographer gestured. "You two are a little far apart. Scoot closer." Emma looked down. There was barely any space left. She shifted slightly in her seat. "Closer," the photographer encouraged with a grin. "Let's get a cozy shot." Emma's face turned pink. Any closer, and she'd be practically leaning into him. Suddenly, Aidan reached out, his hand lightly taking her arm. Before she could react, he pulled her gently against his side. Startled, Emma glanced up, only to find herself inches from his face. His expression was unreadable, but his presence was overwhelming. His cologne was faint, clean. She could even see the light shadow of stubble on his jawline. He really was striking. For a moment it felt real. Then she reminded herself. This was just a contract. Aidan's voice cut through her thoughts, low and laced with something sharp. "Are you embarrassed to marry someone like me?" Emma turned her gaze to him, startled by his question and the tone behind it. He was mocking himself, testing her. She met his eyes steadily. "In sickness and in health, right? We're husband and wife now, even if we didn't say vows." She paused, voice softening. "You've already done so much for me and for my mom. Why should I be embarrassed?" The words husband and wife echoed in her chest as her cheeks warmed with color. Aidan's eyes widened, just slightly. Something in her answer had caught him off guard. Aidan's eyes remained fixed on Emma, their quiet intensity unreadable. The photographer's voice broke the moment. "All done. Next couple, please." As if awakened from a spell, Emma and Aidan both shifted in their seats. Emma looked slightly uneasy, but Aidan remained impassive. Gripping the wheels of his chair, he prepared to move on his own. "Let me help," Emma offered, stepping forward. Aidan's gaze flicked to her bandaged right arm. Without a word, he gently nudged her left hand aside and rolled away on his own. Chris stepped in wordlessly and resumed pushing the wheelchair. Emma looked down at her empty hand, stunned for a beat. She glanced up, watching him roll ahead. Did he dislike being touched by her? It was the same coldness as before. So why did he marry her at all? Emma followed behind, a quiet ache blooming in her chest. Why take wedding photos if this meant nothing? What memories were they preserving, if not real ones? Of course, she wouldn't understand the true meaning of those photos, not until years later, when they would bring her to tears in his arms. Outside the courthouse, Emma expected further instructions or some discussion, but Aidan simply turned to Chris and said, "Take her back to the hospital." She blinked. "That's it?" As she reached for the front passenger door, Chris called out gently, "Doctor." "Turner, could you please sit in the back? I need to put something in the front seat." Emma opened her mouth to ask why it couldn't go in the back, but one look at Aidan, already seated behind the tinted glass, told her everything. Of course, nothing could sit beside him in the back. "I'm sorry, Aidan," she said softly, slipping into the seat beside him. Aidan caught the way Chris was smiling in the mirror and narrowed his eyes. Emma didn't understand the exchange between the two men, but she could feel how tense the air had become. She instinctively pressed closer to the door, as far from Aidan as she could. Aidan, misreading her withdrawal, assumed she didn't want to sit near him. His expression darkened. Emma noticed his growing silence and misread it as irritation with her proximity. So she shrank further, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Neither spoke for the rest of the drive. The silence was thick with misunderstanding. When they arrived at the hospital, Emma wasted no time opening the door. "Thank you for the ride," she said politely, stepping out and smoothing her dress. She lingered for a moment, clutching her hands, hoping Aidan might follow her inside to visit her mother, but she couldn't bring herself to ask. From the car, Aidan's eyes flickered. He could see exactly what she was hoping for, but after a moment's pause, he simply said, "Drive." Chris glanced from Aidan to Emma, clearly wanting to say something, but he kept silent, turned the key, and drove away. Aidan stared out the window as Emma's figure grew smaller in the rearview mirror, then disappeared entirely. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes, reluctance perhaps, but it vanished just as quickly. Chris cleared his throat carefully. "Boss, your mother asked you to visit." Aidan rolled his eyes. "Did you tell her?" "No, of course not," Chris replied quickly. "She just showed me a few photos and asked me to pick one." "Fine, take me to the house." Aidan leaned back, closing his eyes, but the scent of Emma's hair still lingered in the car. Back at the hospital, Emma stood for a moment watching the vehicle vanish down the street. Then she squared her shoulders, turned, and walked back into the lobby. The entrance was unusually crowded. Reporters swarmed the doors, cameras flashing. Emma instinctively took a step back and looked up. Alicia Myers was being escorted out of the hospital. Sunglasses perched on her nose, flawless makeup in place. Alicia wore a calm and collected expression as reporters peppered her with questions. "Miss Myers, you fainted on set. How are you feeling now? Is it true you've been cast as the lead in director Zachary Smith's new film? Do you think your connection with the Grant family influenced the casting?" Alicia smiled, all grace and poise. "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine now," she said into the microphones. One of her assistants leaned in and whispered something to her. Alicia nodded, adjusted her glasses, and moved toward a black SUV waiting by the curb. Then, a bolder voice shouted, "Miss Myers, is it true you're dating the younger Grant brother? Is that how you landed the role?" Alicia froze for just a second, but it was enough to reveal her discomfort. Before she could answer, her bodyguard quickly stepped in. "Miss Myers isn't giving interviews today. Please direct all questions to her management." The car door closed behind her, and the vehicle sped off into traffic. Only once the reporters began to scatter did Emma step from around the corner, her fingers clenched tightly around her bag, her knuckles pale. She watched the car drive off, a mixture of hurt and disbelief swirling in her eyes. How was she supposed to walk into her mother's room after seeing that? Inside, Nancy looked up as soon as Emma returned. "Emma, what's wrong?" Emma blinked and forced a smile. "Mom, you're awake. Where's the nurse?" "She stepped out for a bit. I'm feeling much better. But you look pale, sweetheart. Are you okay?" Emma shook her head quickly. "I'm fine. A cat ran across the hallway and startled me, that's all." "A cat? In a hospital?" "Someone must have brought it to visit a patient. You know I've been scared of cats since I was little." Nancy chuckled softly. "You really should be more careful." "I will, Mom. Promise." Emma changed the subject quickly. "By the way, the best heart surgeon in North America is flying in tomorrow for your surgery." Nancy's eyes widened. "What? Why? That must be expensive." "Mom, it's already covered. My husband arranged it." Nancy blinked. Your husband? Emma took a quiet breath and pulled something from her purse. She handed Nancy the official marriage certificate. I'm married, Mom, to Aiden. Nancy stared at the document, reading it carefully. It was real, legal, genuine. But the name beside Emma's wasn't what she expected. Aiden. Wasn't it Peter? She asked, puzzled. Emma gave a sheepish smile. Baby girl, Nancy said with a teasing scold. Are you so worried I wouldn't approve that you went and hid your whole wedding from me? It just happened today, Emma said quickly. We only went to sign the paperwork. I was planning to tell you soon. Nancy laughed and shook her head. Well, where is he? Why didn't he come? He's really busy right now, but he'll visit once he finishes work. I promise. Nancy gave her a soft look. He better start making more time for you now that you're married. Emma leaned her head gently on her mother's shoulder. As long as you're happy, Nancy murmured, that's all I care about. If he treats you well, I don't care how rich or cold his family might be. Emma smiled. Thanks, Mom. Right now you just need to focus on resting and getting ready for tomorrow. Nancy nodded as Emma lifted her head, her eyes full of quiet hope. Young lady, you think you can lecture your mom now? Nancy teased with a playful glare. Shouldn't I be the one lecturing you? Emma chuckled, and the two burst into a warm, genuine laugh that filled the quiet hospital room with a rare moment of peace. Meanwhile, at the Grant family estate, the living room was bathed in soft morning light. Old Mrs. Grant sat watching a television segment where Alicia Myers gave an interview to a crowd of flashing cameras. The moment Alicia mentioned the younger Grant brother, the matriarch's expression darkened. I heard Peter broke up with that girl Emma because of her, she said sharply. Brenda Grant, peeling an orange beside her, glanced at the screen. Well, she's clever. She's an actress, and Peter seems to like her. Mum, maybe we should let the kids handle their own business. Brenda had never cared for Emma. She thought the girl lacked refinement, and worse, she had little to say in their social circles. Now, with Peter moving on to Alicia, poised, media-savvy, charming, Brenda felt vindicated. She handed her mother-in-law an orange segment, but Mrs. Grant ignored it completely. At that moment, Chris entered the room, pushing Aiden's wheelchair. The old woman's face lit up like sunshine breaking through clouds. You're back, she exclaimed, rising eagerly. Grandma? Aiden greeted her with a rare warmth. Brenda's expression soured slightly. Despite all her efforts to win favor, the matriarch reserved her deepest affection for Aiden, the quiet, sharp-eyed grandson who had once been the pride of the family, even after the accident. Brenda stood up, forcing a smile. Since Aiden's home, I'll ask the chef to prepare his favorite dishes. But Mrs. Grant waved her off with little patience, reaching instead for Aiden's hand. Come with Grandma, she said fondly. I heard some scolding earlier. What happened? Aiden's tone softened. It's Peter. He's dating someone new. Mrs. Grant gave a huff. Forget him. You're just in time. I've got photos of eligible young women from the best families. Let's choose one for you to meet. But Aiden had come prepared. A subtle glint passed through his dark eyes as he pulled a photo from his jacket pocket. No need, Grandma. I've already found someone. Mrs. Grant blinked in surprise. Really? Who? Aiden gave her a calm, measured smile. When the time is right, I'll bring her to meet you, but you have to promise, no judging. Mrs. Grant gripped his hand. I'll love whoever you choose. Pinky promise. Aiden's lips curved faintly. Behind him, Chris gave his boss a discreet thumbs up. Everyone in the family knew how much the old woman had adored Emma Turner, long before Peter betrayed her. Now that Emma was legally married to Aiden, and with a prenuptial agreement in place, it didn't matter who objected. Later, in the study, Aidan sat quietly at his desk. He signed a document with elegant precision, then handed it to Chris. "This is for tomorrow's meeting," Chris explained, placing another folder in front of him. Aidan rubbed his forehead. "How's everything going at the hospital?" Chris blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, yes, all the specialists have arrived. Nancy Turner's condition has remained stable. Her surgery is scheduled for tomorrow." Aidan flipped through a stack of documents. Then he paused. "Cancel all my meetings tomorrow." Chris looked stunned. "But sir, there are high-priority video conferences. Investors are—" The papers flew from Aidan's hand. "I said cancel them." "Yes, sir." Chris hurried to pick up the files, saying nothing. He glanced at Aidan's face, then quietly left the room, closing the door behind him. The next morning at 8 a.m., Nancy was wheeled into the operating room. Emma paced anxiously in the corridor, her hands clenched tightly together. Just then, Chris approached, pushing Aidan's wheelchair down the hallway. Emma stopped, blinking in surprise. "Aidan, why are you here?" "To pick up my medicine," he said coolly. "I was nearby, so I stopped by." Chris nearly choked on air. Pick up medicine? After cancelling a day full of executive meetings? But a sharp glance from Aidan made him snap his mouth shut. Emma, preoccupied with her mother, didn't catch the strange tension between the two men. The hallway was quiet, the atmosphere heavy with nerves. Aidan stayed by Emma's side without another word, content to sit in silence as nurses came and went from the operating room. His presence offered quiet support, even if neither of them acknowledged it aloud. Time passed slowly. Then Chris returned, hurrying toward them with Aidan's phone in hand. "Sir," he said quietly, his voice laced with concern. Aidan frowned. "What is it?" Chris leaned down and whispered something in Aidan's ear. Aidan's expression hardened, but he didn't move. Before anything else could be said, a nurse stepped out of the operating room. "She's stable. The surgery went well. She's being transferred to recovery." Emma exhaled in relief. "Thank you," she whispered, and rushed down the hall to be with her mother. Aidan remained in the corridor only a moment longer. Once he confirmed Nancy was safe, he turned to Chris. "Let's go." Later that day, Nancy was transferred from the ICU to the VIP ward. Her color had returned and her spirits were high. Emma's right hand, now free from its cast, was still wrapped in bandages. The doctor assured her she would begin gentle physiotherapy soon. Emma leaned over the bed, cupping her mother's cheek gently. "Mum, you're out of ICU now. You're going to get better." Nancy smiled, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Emma, is Aidan really that busy? He didn't even stop by after my surgery." Emma paused. The question surprised her. Only now did she remember. Aidan had sat beside her the entire time outside the operating room. But once the doctor announced the successful procedure, she had rushed off without a word. "I forgot to tell you," she said, her voice soft. "He was there, the whole time. He waited with me until we heard the surgery was successful. Then he left to go back to work." "Really?" Nancy looked skeptical. "If you don't believe me, ask the nurses," Emma replied with a faint smile. "Emma, since Aidan is always so busy, you need to take good care of him," Nancy said gently, holding her daughter's hand. "He must be under so much pressure. There are nurses looking after me here. You should go back and be with your husband." "All right," Emma replied, trying not to show the uncertainty rising inside her. In truth, she had no idea where to even find Aidan. But that evening, with her mother practically nudging her out of the hospital room, Emma found herself standing outside Aidan's apartment in the Upper East Side, clutching the neatly folded coat he had once draped over her shoulders. She took a breath and rang the doorbell. A moment later, the soft sound of wheels on hardwood echoed inside. the door swung open to reveal Aidan himself. "You came," he said, his voice calm, eyes unreadable. "I brought your coat back," Emma said, holding up the garment. "I washed it for you." Aidan blinked as if distracted, then gave a faint nod and turned his chair around. "Come in." Emma followed him into the quiet apartment. "Have you eaten?" she asked. "Chris went out," was all he said, which didn't exactly answer the question. Taking that as a cue, Emma added, "Would you mind if I made something for dinner?" Aidan didn't reply, but he didn't object either. He simply wheeled off into his study. Emma took it as permission. Rolling up her sleeves, she stepped into the kitchen and paused in surprise. It looked like a showroom, gleaming countertops, spotless appliances, and no signs of actual use. Everything was pristine, almost too pristine. But when she opened the fridge, it was fully stocked with fresh ingredients, almost like someone was routinely replacing them, despite no one cooking. She found a bag of rice in one cabinet and sighed in relief. Rice always worked. With practiced hands, her bandaged right arm slowing her only slightly, Emma chopped vegetables, prepped the chicken, and stirred up a simple but comforting meal. The sounds of cooking filled the quiet apartment. From his study, Aidan heard it all. The sound of running water, a knife against a cutting board, the faint clatter of dishes. It made the apartment feel different, warmer. His thoughts drifted for a moment until his phone buzzed. "Sir, I've picked up Mr. Johansson. Want me to grab dinner for you?" Chris's voice asked on the other end of the line. Aidan glanced in the direction of the kitchen. "No need." "You sure? You don't want—" Click. Chris blinked at the phone in disbelief from the driver's seat outside JFK Airport. Beside him, a man in dark sunglasses raised an eyebrow. "What was that about?" "Nothing," Chris muttered. Rex Johansson grinned. "Come on, Chris. I know when you're hiding something. What's going on? Trouble at the apartment?" Chris kept his eyes on the road. "I just need to check in on Aidan before I drop you off." Rex leaned back with a smirk. "Of course, everything revolves around Mr. Aidan." Despite the teasing, Chris didn't respond. Rex, however, seemed perfectly content to fill the silence with jokes and chatter on the way back into the city. Back at the apartment, the savory smell of dinner was just beginning to drift through the rooms. Emma stepped out of the kitchen just as the front door opened. She expected Chris. Instead, she froze mid-step as a tall stranger entered the apartment, taking off his sunglasses. He paused, sniffing the air. "Something smells amazing. Did Aidan order delivery or—" He stopped when he saw her. Emma blinked, equally startled. "Hi," she said awkwardly, a spatula still in her hand. Chris stepped in behind the man and nodded. "Doctor Turner, you're still here." Emma gave a small smile. "Dinner's almost ready." Rex turned to Chris, voice low. "Who is she? What's going on?" Chris smirked but didn't answer. "You can ask Mr. Aidan yourself." Rex's curiosity was now in full swing. He straightened his collar, glanced at his reflection in the hallway mirror, then made his way into the kitchen. "Hey there," he said with a warm smile. "I'm Rex, and you are?" "Emma," she replied politely, eyes on the frying pan. Rex leaned casually against the counter, intrigued. "So, Emma, you cook like this for Aidan often?" Emma smiled faintly. "Just helping out. Need any help?" Rex asked, motioning toward Emma's bandaged hand. Emma gave him a polite but guarded glance. She had a feeling that if he stepped into the kitchen, he'd cause more chaos than assistance. "Thanks, but I've got it," she said, turning back to the stove. Unfazed by her cool response, Rex leaned against the kitchen doorway, his expression curious. He tried to figure her out. She didn't seem like a maid, especially with the way Chris had treated her respectfully. Then, with far too much boldness, Rex blurted, "So, are you and Aiden together?" Emma froze mid-stir. Her cheeks flushed in embarrassment. What kind of question was that? Before she could gather a response, Aiden's voice came from the living room, rescuing her. "Rex, did you come all this way just to admire my kitchen?" With a sheepish grin, Rex pointed toward Emma. "I was just asking a question," he muttered before strolling out to join Aiden. Emma let out a quiet sigh of relief, turned back to the stove, and began plating the chicken. She added vegetables to the pan, grateful for the distraction. Meanwhile, in the living room, Rex flopped down on the couch across from Aiden, his face full of mock hurt. "Really, Aiden? That's how you greet me? I flew across the country just to see you." "You mean you snuck over here for some drama?" Aiden replied dryly, though the edge in his voice wasn't only sarcasm. The image of Rex chatting with Emma in the kitchen had left an odd tension in Aiden's chest. Trying to shake it off, he asked casually, "So, who's the lucky person this time?" "You fall for someone again?" Rex grinned. "What? No, it's work. I'm here for a charity event. Don't tell me you haven't heard of the International Benefit Banquet happening tomorrow." Aiden arched an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Helping someone? Or following someone?" All right, yes. She's gorgeous and very persuasive," Rex admitted with a grin. "Anyway, I put you on the guest list. You'll be getting an invitation." "I'll pass," Aiden said without hesitation. "Oh, come on. A charity banquet needs someone like you to speak. Plus..." Rex glanced toward the kitchen as Emma walked out, carrying dishes. "You never know what surprises the night could bring." Aiden didn't respond, but the sight of Emma, sleeves rolled up and eyes focused on the plates she was balancing, caught his attention. "Come on," Rex pressed. "Be my +1. Aiden was too distracted to think straight. "Fine," he muttered. He barely noticed the pleased grin that spread across Rex's face. Moments later, Chris walked out of the kitchen and gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner's ready." "Let's eat." Rex jumped up and gave Aiden's wheelchair a gentle nudge toward the table. Aiden took his place at the head, Chris sat across from him, and Emma was about to slide in beside Chris when Rex quickly spoke up. "Emma, I need to discuss something with Chris. Why don't you sit next to Aiden instead?" Without waiting for a reply, Rex plopped down beside Chris, flashing a cheeky grin. Chris raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Emma hesitated for a moment before quietly sitting beside Aiden. The table was set simply, just a pot of rice, stir-fried vegetables, and chicken, but the warmth of a home-cooked meal filled the space like comfort. "Emma, this is really good," Rex said, genuinely impressed. "Thank you," Emma replied softly. Her right arm was still wrapped in bandages, and she struggled to cut the chicken with one hand. Aiden noticed, and, without saying a word, reached over and carefully cut her chicken into small, bite-sized pieces with practiced ease. Emma blinked, then leaned in and whispered just loud enough for him to hear. "Thanks." Rex watched them with amusement. He smirked, but didn't say anything, though his expression clearly read, "They're definitely more than they say they are." Before long, Rex's phone buzzed. "I've got to take care of something," he said, standing up abruptly. "Chris, could you see me out?" "Yes, sir," Chris replied, grabbing his keys. With a final wave, Rex disappeared out the door. Now alone, Aiden and Emma sat in a quiet that wasn't uncomfortable. They ate without rushing, without fuss. It was oddly peaceful, like they'd known each other longer than they had. Afterward, Emma stood up and began to gather the plates. "You can leave that," Aiden said. "Chris will handle it." Emma blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, okay. I'll just clean up quickly," Emma offered, taking a serving bowl in her left hand and steadying it with her right. Aidan pursed his lips, his gaze locked on her awkward posture. Without a word, he wheeled after her into the kitchen. "Let me do it," he said flatly. "What?" Emma froze in place. "Move aside. I'll handle the dishes," Aidan repeated, his tone cool and commanding, filling the kitchen with a sharp tension. Emma stepped aside, watching in disbelief as he methodically began tidying the kitchen. He moved with surprising familiarity, loading the dishwasher, wiping down counters, and returning every utensil to its proper place. His serious expression made it seem like he was organizing financial statements instead of washing dishes. What stunned her even more was how efficiently he moved, despite needing to balance dishes in his lap as he rolled back and forth. When he finished, his tailored casual suit had light stains from the sink. Without a word, he turned on the tap and dabbed at the spots, his movements unbothered, even graceful. When he turned around and met Emma's astonished gaze, his usual distant demeanor had returned, but for a brief moment she had seen a different side of him, quiet, capable, and considerate beneath the cold exterior. The next morning, Emma awoke to a soft knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. "Coming," she called sleepily, rubbing her eyes. From behind the door, Chris's voice came through. "Emma, I've hung your clothes on the doorknob." "Okay, thanks." She opened the door to find a few sleek shopping bags, no one in sight. Inside were neatly pressed clothes. She changed into a light blue dress and stepped out just as Chris exited the room next door. "Good morning, Emma. Breakfast is ready. Grapefruit, coffee cake, and scrambled eggs." "Thanks, Chris." She smiled, still feeling a little shy in Aidan's home. After a quiet breakfast, Chris drove Emma to the hospital. At 4 p.m., Aidan received a sleek, gold-embossed envelope from Rex. Inside was a heavy invitation card bearing a golden apple blossom, symbol of the International Benefit Banquet. It was addressed to Mr. Aidan Grant and Dr. Emma Turner. Aidan narrowed his eyes. "No thanks to Rex," he muttered. Chris peered over his shoulder. "That's the benefit banquet you always skip." Aidan's phone rang. He answered with his usual calm. "This is Aidan." "Aidan, got the invite?" Rex's energetic voice rang out. "You said I wouldn't have to go." "You promised me last night. Don't bail," Rex insisted. Aidan rubbed his forehead. He vaguely recalled agreeing during their dinner. "All right, I'll go." "Great, and remember, bring Emma. Her name's already on the table card," Rex added quickly, then hung up before Aidan could change his mind. Aidan stared at the silent phone, eyebrows drawn together. Chris, standing nearby, already knew what to do. "I'll call her and let her know to be ready at 5, he said. Aidan simply nodded and returned to his papers. When Emma got the call, she froze. A benefit banquet, Aidan's kind of event? Her heart raced. Even during her time with Peter, she had never attended an event this grand. What if she embarrassed herself? Or worse, embarrassed Aidan? "Emma?" Chris's voice came through the phone. "Yes, I'm here," she replied quickly. "I'll pick you up at 5. "All right." She ended the call and took a deep breath, trying to calm the swirl of nerves inside her. At 5 o'clock, Emma waited at the hospital entrance, clutching her small handbag. She expected Chris's familiar face to greet her, but her eyes widened when she spotted Aidan sitting in the back seat of the car, flipping through a thick folder. "Aidan," she said, startled. "Good evening," he replied casually, barely looking up. Emma slipped into the back seat beside him, nervously smoothing the fabric of her dress. Noticing her tension, Aidan glanced at her and said in a calm voice, "It's just a party. No need to be nervous." Emma nodded, trying her best to relax, but her hands kept fidgeting in her lap. "Sir, we've arrived," Chris said from the front. Emma looked out the window and recognized the location immediately. The car had stopped in Manhattan's fashion district. Peter had once brought her here. Back then, she had thought the designer stores were too luxurious and hadn't felt like she belonged. Today, standing beside Aiden, things felt different. Emma had only visited the designer district once before, just to look, not buy. But now, stepping out of the car, alongside Aiden and Chris, she was walking into one of the most exclusive couture boutiques in Manhattan. The sales associate, a sharply dressed woman named Emily, gave them a once-over. Her gaze lingered slightly on Emma's modest outfit, but then shifted to Aiden. One look at his tailored suit and composed presence, and her demeanor instantly softened into polished professionalism. "Good afternoon. How may I assist you?" she asked with a bright smile. Aiden didn't miss a beat. "She needs a gown for the International Benefit Banquet." "Certainly," Emily replied. She turned to Emma. "May I ask your name?" "Just Emma is fine." "Lovely to meet you, Miss Emma. I'm Emily. Please come with me." Emily led them toward the back, where stylists and consultants waited. Aiden settled into a sleek lounge chair, casually flipping through a style catalogue. Occasionally, he glanced up, his eyes landing on Emma with unreadable expression. Emma, meanwhile, was gently seated by the styling team. Her soft brown waves were curled with elegant precision, and her bangs swept aside to frame her delicate features. Light makeup enhanced her natural radiance, transforming her from reserved to resplendent. When she emerged from the changing room in her first gown, Emily clapped softly. "You're a natural beauty. These designs were made for you." Emma smiled shyly, but Aiden gave only a brief glance and turned a page in the catalogue. They tried several more: lavish silks, delicate chiffon, cascading tulle, but Aiden remained unimpressed. Finally, his eyes locked onto the store's display, a silver-white gown glittering in the window, like moonlight frozen in motion. "That one," he said, pointing. "Have her try it on." Emily's professional demeanor faltered. "Sir, that's a limited edition gown designed by Susan Doe. There are only 2 in existence. This one isn't available for purchase." "Then can it be rented?" Aiden asked coolly. "Well," Emily hesitated, glancing at the bodice encrusted with high-grade diamonds. "It's not typically loaned out. Even the fit is exclusive. The gown has never been altered to maintain its original silhouette. Most clients can't wear it comfortably." "Alicia Myers couldn't wear it, right?" Aiden cut in sharply. Emily blinked, startled that he knew. "Correct, it's exceptionally slim. Estimated value, without accessories, is close to $1 million. "Call your manager and find out," Aiden said, voice steady, "and have her try it on." "Yes, sir." Emily quickly made the call. By the time Emma stepped out in another gown, the store's mannequin had already been undressed, and the radiant dress was being carried reverently to the fitting room. "Miss Emma, allow me to assist you," Emily said. Inside, Emma carefully stepped into the shimmering silver gown. Tiny diamonds cascaded like frost across the fabric. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she touched the bodice lightly, unsure. "Do I look strange?" she asked softly. "Strange?" Emily gasped. "Miss Emma, you look divine." The gown hugged her figure perfectly, as though crafted just for her. Emily added matching gloves and a pair of crystal heels before opening the curtain with flourish. "Sir," Emily announced, "what do you think?" Aiden looked up, and for a heartbeat, forgot to breathe. Emma stood in front of them, bathed in diamonds and light. Her skin glowed against the silver, her eyes sparkled, and her presence radiated grace. For the first time, Aiden's composed mask cracked. Even Chris whispered, "Sir, she looks incredible." Aiden recovered with a cool, "Chris, handle the payment." Yes, sir. Emma approached hesitantly. Aiden, are you sure I should wear this one? The other gowns were lovely too. Why? He asked. She smiled awkwardly. The diamonds. They're so bright they hurt my eyes. Aiden let out a quiet laugh, amused. It was rare to hear such honesty from anyone, especially someone wearing $1 million gown. Even Chris blinked in surprise. He couldn't remember the last time his boss had laughed like that. Emma tilted her head, confused by his amusement. On the ride back, Emma wasn't as giddy as one might expect after wearing something so extravagant. Instead, she stared out the window, 1,000 thoughts clouding her mind. From the admiring looks Emily had given Aiden to the whispers she had overheard at the hospital, it was clear that Aiden was the type of man most women would gravitate toward. Wealthy, intelligent, striking. So why? Why had he chosen her? Even now, dressed like someone from his world, she still felt like a guest in it. And no matter how long she stared at his reflection in the window, she couldn't find the answer. The annual International Benefit Banquet was held at the world-renowned Plaza Hotel, where glamour and old money collided under crystal chandeliers. Guests invited to this black tie affair were either legendary philanthropists, global business elites, or the next wave of social darlings making headlines in fashion, film, or finance. Tonight, the plaza was adorned with velvet ropes, red carpets, and a fleet of shimmering luxury cars that glided to its front steps like scenes from a dream. Even Aiden Grant's Audi, while refined, appeared modest next to the gold-plated Bentleys and chauffeur-driven Phantoms pulling up behind them. Emma stepped out carefully, lifting the hem of her $1 million gown. The diamonds on the fabric glinted in the golden light like stars falling over snow. She hadn't taken 2 steps when a familiar voice pierced the cool air. Emma? Emma turned, and there stood Alicia Myers, her ex-best friend, dressed head to toe in designer couture and flanked by her personal assistant. Alicia's surprise at seeing Emma here quickly turned to confusion, then fury. Emma was wearing the very Susan Doe original that Alicia had once begged the store to alter for her, the same gown the designer had refused to tailor, citing its one-of-a-kind fit. Alicia had been told no one could wear it. Yet, Emma was wearing it. Still, Alicia regained her poise, assuming it must be a replica, a knockoff bejeweled in glass instead of diamonds. It's been a while, Emma said evenly. Just then, Chris pulled Aiden's wheelchair from the trunk. Emma moved quickly to help Aiden out of the car. Alicia's eyes narrowed. She had never seen Aiden before, and when she realized Emma was assisting a man in a wheelchair, especially one driving an Audi, her lips curled into a mocking smile. So, this is who you ended up with after Peter, Alicia sneered. A guy who can't even walk and drives a budget car? That dress he gave you must be a fake. Are you just here to window shop luxury lifestyles? Emma flinched for only a second before lifting her chin. I've told you, I don't want Peter. You're welcome to him. Trash belongs with trash, she said calmly. And just so you know, the man you're insulting, he's my husband, so I suggest you choose your words carefully. Behind his dark eyes, a flicker of light passed over Aiden's expression. He didn't speak, but her words had clearly struck something. Alicia blinked in disbelief. Married? You? That's quick. Her smirk returned. Well, you and your husband make quite the pair, an actress and a fantasy couple. With a scoff, she spun on her heel and strutted toward the entrance, her heels tapping like insults against the stone. Emma exhaled and turned to Aiden, voice soft with regret. Sorry, I didn't mean to involve you. But Aiden simply gave a faint, unreadable smile. There's nothing to be sorry for. She said what she said. Emma remained still until he gave a small wave. Come on, push me. Chris, having parked the car, handed over the keys and nodded. Emma took the handles of Aiden's chair and guided him toward the iconic front doors of the plaza. 2 uniformed staff members stood by the entrance, checking guests against a strict list. Alicia flashed her invitation with pride and was let in without delay. She paused just inside, watching Emma and Aiden approach, clearly waiting for a scene. "May I see your invitation?" one staffer asked, tone polite but firm. From behind the door, Alicia muttered loud enough for Emma to hear. "They don't even have one." Must be trying to sneak in. The staff glanced toward her with mild annoyance, recognizing her only because she'd recently appeared on tabloid covers. Aiden's tone dropped coolly. "My driver has the invitation." "Then please step aside," the man said dismissively. "You're blocking the entrance." He turned to his colleague and muttered under his breath, "Wheelchairs at galas. Classy." Emma's jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" But Aiden raised his hand slightly, silencing her. His gaze was unreadable, but something simmered beneath the calm. Emma pushed him off to the side, ignoring the stares from nearby guests. Just then, Chris returned, and the temperature in the air shifted. "Why haven't you gone in yet?" he asked. "They wouldn't let us through," Emma said quietly. Chris said nothing at first. He stepped toward the staff, pulled out a thick ivory envelope sealed with gold wax, and held it out. "This is for Mr. Aiden Grant," he said firmly. The moment the seal was recognized, the color drained from the doorman's face. He swallowed hard. This wasn't just an invitation. It was one of the rare elite passes, given only to a handful of globally ranked guests. "Apologies, sir. We had no idea." "Can we enter now?" Chris asked icily. Of course. Right this way," they stammered, bowing. Emma, now pushing Aiden forward, passed Alicia without a glance. Alicia's cheeks burned. She clenched her fists and muttered under her breath. "Just lucky, that's all." But luck had nothing to do with it. Inside the plaza ballroom, chandeliers glittered, violins played, and whispers began to spread. Who was the woman in the Susan Doe gown, and who was the man beside her? The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel shimmered with golden light, laughter, and the clinking of crystal glasses. Though the charity banquet had yet to officially begin, the room buzzed with quiet ambition as guests mingled in glittering clusters. After entering, Aiden received a call. "Rex wants to meet me backstage," he told Emma, leaning close enough for only her to hear. "Will you be all right on your own? Should I ask Chris to stay?" Emma shook her head, smiling gently. "Take Chris with you. I'll be fine." Aiden gave a subtle nod, and Chris pushed his chair toward the rear hallway. With Aiden gone, Emma stood straighter, allowing herself a deep breath. She noticed a few curious stares from across the room, but responded with a poised smile. The diamonds in her dress caught the light like water over crystal, and even the skeptics began to wonder, just who is she? Meanwhile, in a private lounge behind the stage, Rex was sprawled across a velvet couch, a half-full glass of red wine in hand. He didn't look remotely like a man with pressing business. "Aiden!" Rex lifted his glass in greeting. "You called me back here for a drink?" Aiden's voice was cool but not unkind. Rex stood up quickly and looked behind Aiden, scanning for someone. "Where is she?" he asked eagerly. "Who?" Aiden feigned ignorance, raising a brow. "Emma Turner, of course," Rex said with exaggerated impatience. "After all the trouble I went through reprinting your invitation card." Just then, the sound of heels clicking echoed from behind. A woman approached, a striking figure in a gold silk gown with a daring slit and glistening heels. Her presence turned heads, even in this room full of socialites. Aiden turned, eyebrows rising slightly. He looked at Rex with quiet curiosity. "Is this what you brought me back here for?" he asked. Rex leaned in and wrapped an arm around Aiden's shoulder, lowering his voice. "What do you think? She's stunning, isn't she?" Aiden gave the woman a measured glance. "Not bad," he said neutrally. "How long have you known her?" "Not long," Rex grinned, "but long enough to know I want to impress her." Aiden gave a faint shake of his head. Rex's romantic optimism hadn't changed a bit. Susie Doyle, elegant and composed, extended her hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Grant. I'm Susie." "Aiden," he replied simply, accepting the handshake without flourish. Unfazed by his cool demeanor, Susie gestured politely toward the entrance. "If you'll excuse me, I need to welcome a few guests. Please make yourselves comfortable." As she left, Rex turned back to Aiden, pouring him a fresh glass of wine. "Come on, just one sip. It's an 82 Lafite." But Aiden wasn't interested in drinks. "Since I've met your friend, I'll take my leave now." "Wait," Rex said, his tone shifting. "There's something else." He paused before continuing, his expression more serious than usual. "Susie's uncle, Dr. Lawrence Smith, is a top surgeon in Canada. I told him about your condition. He's looked through the medical files I sent him, and he believes there's a surgical procedure that could help." Aiden didn't move. "He said there's a 30% success rate, Aiden. That's huge. The average prognosis for your condition is only 10. This could mean walking again." Aiden's expression grew still, almost unreadable. "He wants to conduct an evaluation. I've arranged for you to meet him with Susie the day after tomorrow before she flies back." But before Rex could continue, Aiden cut him off. "I'm not going." Rex stepped forward. "Aiden, you said yourself you're not interested in false hope. But this isn't false. It's a chance. What if—" "That's enough." Aiden's voice dropped into a quiet finality. He turned to Chris. "Push me back to the ballroom." Chris hesitated, shooting Rex a glance, but Aiden's look left no room for argument. As Chris turned the wheelchair, Rex called after him. "Just think about it, Aiden. That's all I'm asking." But Aiden didn't look back. He didn't need to. The weight of the offer already lingered heavily in the silence behind him. Aiden had barely been pushed a few feet from backstage when Rex's words echoed behind him. "Are you really planning to spend the rest of your life in that chair, with Emma?" His back stiffened, but he said nothing. Instead, he signaled for Chris to keep moving. Back in the ballroom, Emma was surrounded by conversation. Men hovered nearby, hoping to introduce themselves, while women gathered in awe. "That dress," a woman gasped, eyes wide. "Isn't that the latest Susan Doe?" Emma blinked. "I'm sorry," she asked, clearly unsure. A young woman in a canary yellow dress stepped forward, eyes gleaming. "Miss, may I ask, is your gown an original by Susan Doe, the chief designer at Diamond Fashion?" Before Emma could respond, a too familiar voice cut in, smooth as satin and twice as sharp. "That's just a knockoff," said Alicia Myers, her voice laced with smugness. Champagne glass in hand, she strutted toward the group like she owned the ballroom. "I've tried on the real Susan Doe design," Alicia continued. "It didn't fit me, and I doubt it fits her either. What she's wearing, definitely a replica." Several guests turned to Emma, suddenly intrigued for the wrong reasons. "She's just trying to show off," one whispered. "A fake gown at a high society event? How bold," murmured another. Emma's face paled. She bit her lower lip, unable to speak through the growing embarrassment. But then, "That's not a replica." The voice came from behind them, clear, confident, and calm. All heads turned. A breathtaking woman stood just beyond the group, her golden dress shimmering under the chandeliers. She exuded elegance with a presence that silenced the chatter instantly. Alicia blinked, startled. "Who are you?" Do you even know fashion? Have you ever seen the real Susan Doe gown? The woman smiled faintly and crossed her arms. Actually, I designed it. A hush fell over the crowd. A nearby man exclaimed in disbelief. Susan Doe? The golden woman nodded slightly in greeting, and whispers rippled outward like waves. It's really her, Susan Doe. She's even more beautiful in person. That explains how she recognized the gown immediately. Alicia's pride shattered on the spot. Her smile stiffened, then vanished completely. Standing mere inches from one of fashion's most celebrated designers, Alicia had just accused her of not recognizing her own creation. Realizing the crowd was now staring at her, not Emma with raised brows and barely hidden smirks, Alicia could take no more. She turned and fled the ballroom, her heels clicking faster than her pride could catch up. The women dispersed, their curiosity satisfied, leaving the floor clear for a new round of admirers, this time young men vying for Emma's attention. Miss, may I get you a drink? Are you here alone? Care for some company? Emma frowned politely. No, thank you. At that moment, Aidan returned, his expression unreadable. Chris was pushing him forward at a measured pace, but his eyes immediately locked on Emma. He saw the men around her, the way they hovered, the sparkle in her eyes. Whether it was imagined or not, he didn't like it. His tone turned sharp. I leave you alone for a moment, and this is what happens? Flirting with everyone in sight? Emma froze. I didn't. Her words faltered as tears welled in her eyes, stunned by his accusation. Aidan clenched his jaw. He knew it wasn't fair. He wasn't angry with her. Not really. But the cocktail of emotions stirred up by Rex's comment, the spotlight on Emma, and his own insecurities had boiled over. Take me home, he ordered coldly. Chris gave Emma a quiet glance that said, Follow us, then wheeled Aidan out. Emma stood motionless for a moment. Then she gathered her gown and followed quietly. Back at the apartment, Aidan said nothing. He rolled into the study and shut the door with a soft but firm click. Chris and Emma stood in the living room, the silence hanging awkwardly between them. Emma, Chris began gently. Aidan didn't mean what he said. He's been under a lot of pressure, and when he saw you surrounded like that, it just got to him. Chris, Emma replied calmly, you don't need to explain. She straightened her posture, but her voice was tinged with melancholy. The moment I signed that contract, I gave up the right to be angry with him. Today I lost my composure. That's on me. I'll remember not to let it happen again. She gave a small, wry smile, directed more at herself than anyone else. Chris hesitated outside the study door, lips parted to speak, but then he glanced at Aidan's closed office and sighed. Now wasn't the time. Emma, could you stay with him? I need to step out for a while, he said gently. Emma nodded. Of course. Once Chris left, the apartment fell into complete stillness. The silence made Emma feel like the whole room had gone cold, like the crisp air of late autumn had slipped through a cracked window. After a long pause, she rose from the couch and headed into the kitchen. Inside the fridge, she found a bowl of leftover Chinese takeout. She warmed it up and made her way toward the study. Knock, knock. Aidan's voice shot out, sharp and angry. Get lost! Emma paused. Chris had warned her that Aidan lost control of his temper when truly upset. Was he still angry about the banquet? Had she embarrassed him? She frowned, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. Aidan was slumped over his desk, surrounded by scattered papers. He didn't even look up when she entered. Without a word, Emma placed the bowl on the desk and crouched down to start gathering the papers from the floor. I said get out! Aidan barked. Emma didn't respond. She kept tidying. I told you to leave. In a burst of frustration, Aidan knocked over the bowl, It hit the desk and spilled hot sauce all over his hands. "Aiden!" Emma gasped and immediately rushed to his side, pulling out tissues to wipe the sauce off his skin. Seeing that the heat had scalded him, she ran to the bathroom, grabbed a cold washcloth, and returned. Aiden watched her, speechless, as she carefully dabbed at his hands, eyes focused, not a word of complaint. She was gentle, patient, unbothered by his anger or his harsh words. She was the only one who had ever stayed. Emma looked up and asked softly, "Does it still hurt? Your hand's turning red." She disappeared again, only to return moments later with an ice pack, which she carefully placed on his hand. Aiden stayed still, uncertain of what to say. Emma, meanwhile, began cleaning up the spilled food, then gently reorganized the scattered paperwork. Once everything was tidied, she peeked at his hand again. No blisters. Good. Without a word, she turned and walked out. The room went quiet again. Aiden sat motionless, but his thoughts were restless. Did she leave? Is she upset now? He was just about to go check when the door opened and Emma poked her head in. She smiled gently, like coaxing a sulking child. "I warmed up some chicken noodle soup. Want some?" Aiden's heart skipped. She hadn't left, but outwardly he only replied with a neutral, "Fine." Emma pushed his chair into the dining room and served them both. Though the soup was from a carton, she'd added fresh scallions, mushrooms, peas, and a pinch of seasoning. The aroma filled the room. Aiden glanced at his bowl, then silently picked out the scallions and mushrooms. Emma noticed, her eyes darting over without a word. He doesn't like zucchini or bell peppers either, she recalled. She mentally filed away the new details, quietly remembering what he liked and didn't. When Chris returned, he stopped short in the doorway. The sight before him was almost unreal. Aiden, sitting at the table, calmly eating soup. "Sir, I brought takeout," Chris began. "We've eaten," Emma said gently. "You can just put it in the fridge. We'll save it for tomorrow." Chris blinked. Aiden hadn't even looked up. "Right, okay," Chris muttered, heading for the kitchen. As he passed, Aiden finally spoke. "Clean the kitchen." Chris's face stiffened. Was he being punished? Emma stepped in. "I can do it." But Chris waved her off and quickly started clearing the table. "No need, Emma. Really." He didn't want to risk Aiden's fury returning if Emma ended up washing the dishes. He quietly resumed his task, trying to avoid any further incident. Suddenly, Chris popped his head out of the kitchen with a thoughtful expression. "Oh yeah. Emma, do you want me to bring your luggage over?" Emma paused. She hadn't brought up moving in. Aiden hadn't said anything either. This was all Chris, but she understood what he was doing. "All right," she said simply, not realizing she was stepping into Chris's well-meaning scheme. Emma had rented a small furnished apartment in Brooklyn after her breakup with Peter. She hadn't returned since. She turned the key slowly, stepping into the quiet space. Everything was exactly how she left it. Untouched, unchanged. That meant Peter hadn't come by. Even after all that had happened, a tiny part of her had wondered, hoped, maybe, that he would. Emma sighed and shook her head at herself. Really, Emma? Still clinging to that? Just then, a voice called out from the hallway. "Emma, are you back?" It was her landlady, Mrs. Douglas. Emma stepped into the hall. "Hi, Mrs. Douglas." The older woman smiled sheepishly, glancing at Chris, who stood there, tall and composed. "Oh, Emma, it's just that my son suddenly moved back in." "Well, it's like this," the landlady began, shifting awkwardly. "My son moved back from California with his fiancé, and they're planning to get married. They don't have much saved, so I wanted to offer them this unit. I'm really sorry to ask, but would you consider ending your lease early?" Emma froze for a moment. How could she say no? In truth, it worked out. She was already here to move her things into Aidan's apartment. So, she nodded with a tight smile. Actually, I'm moving out today. That works perfectly. The landlady beamed in relief. Wonderful. I'll return the remaining rent to you today. No need to clean. My son and his fiancée are staying with me for now. Emma nodded again and saw her out, but as she turned back into the apartment, a quiet ache tugged at her chest. In the end, I even lost this place. She forced herself to smile, but the disappointment lingered. The apartment had never held much, but Peter had brought over many of his things, and now, as Emma began packing, she sighed. She filled the suitcases and boxes Chris had brought and walked into the bedroom. She paused at the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. Then she gathered up the clothes and other belongings Peter had left behind. Once everything was packed, Emma sat on the couch and stared at her phone. After a long moment, she made a decision. One last call. The phone rang once, then someone answered. "Hello?" A woman's voice. Emma's eyes narrowed. Alicia. "I'm looking for Peter," she said calmly. The voice on the other end sharpened. "Emma, how dare you call Peter again and try to bother him?" Emma exhaled slowly, unimpressed. "Alicia, I'm not interested in Peter," she said firmly. "I called to ask if he still wants the things he left at my apartment. If not, I'll just throw them away." "He doesn't want them," Alicia snapped. "Just toss them. And by the way, Peter doesn't use this number anymore. Don't ever call again." Click. The call ended. Emma stared at the screen. That number had been saved in her phone for over 3 years. She tapped the delete button. Yes, the number disappeared. "Peter, you once said our numbers were only 3 digits apart. Let's never change them, you said. Well, we've both moved on now." She picked up 2 suitcases and stood. Chris appeared at the doorway. "Let me help," he said. Emma gestured toward a large cardboard box. "Could you toss this in the dumpster, out back? Thanks." Chris nodded without a word and carried the box out. Emma took one last look at the apartment she had lived in for 3 years. Surprisingly, she felt no attachment to it at all. She closed the door behind her. By the time they returned to the Upper East Side, it was nearly 10 p.m. Aidan sat in the living room, watching television, but when he saw Chris carrying Emma's luggage in, his face darkened under the dim light. "Chris, I need a word," he said flatly, turning his wheelchair and heading into the study. Chris winced. That tone wasn't promising. He followed quickly, casting a brief apologetic glance at Emma. She carried the rest of her things into her room and unpacked quietly. Inside the study, Aidan sat by the window, staring out at the night. The room was silent. Chris stood still, glancing nervously between Aidan and the floor. Finally, Aidan spoke, his voice cool, almost detached. "You're getting bold, Chris." Chris lowered his head. "Sir, I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" Aidan asked, voice cold as ice. Chris felt it cut through him. "I shouldn't have given your medical records to Rex Johansson without your permission." Aidan turned toward him. "You've worked for me for years. You know how I feel about that." His gaze was sharp. "Is that the only thing you did without asking me?" Chris flinched. For a second, Aidan's face looked unreadable, neither anger nor understanding, just quiet intensity. Chris nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, guilt tightening his voice. "Well, aside from inviting Emma to move in." Aidan held his stare for a long beat. Then he spoke, calm but firm. "Next time you make a decision behind my back, pack your things and leave." Chris straightened. "Yes, sir. I won't do it again," Chris muttered, exhaling in relief. That was close. Aidan raised his eyebrows slightly, his expression unreadable. He tapped his fingers against his knee and narrowed his eyes at Chris. Starting tomorrow, you'll be in charge of establishing the new subsidiary in New Jersey. Chris blinked. The subsidiary? Me? Aidan didn't reply. Instead, he added flatly, I want results by the end of the month. Chris groaned. That's a lot to do in just 2 weeks. But Aidan was done talking. In his mind, the matter was settled. Chris knew better than to argue. He exited the study quickly, relieved he had escaped worse. Guess I got off easy, because I convinced her to move in, Aidan thought to himself, a small smile tugging at his lips for the first time that day. And just like that, Emma was living at Aidan's apartment. Chris, busy with the new business assignment, wasn't around much. Each morning, Emma made breakfast for Aidan before visiting Nancy at the hospital. Then she'd rush back to prepare lunch and leave again for her physiotherapy sessions. It was a different kind of life, but it kept her busy, and she found a strange peace in the routine. Meanwhile, tabloids buzzed with news about Peter and Alicia. Not long after being spotted together at various events, the two publicly confirmed their relationship in an interview. Just 2 days later, Emma received unexpected news from Aidan. After lunch, as she was wiping down the kitchen counters, she heard his voice from the living room. Get ready, he said calmly, sitting there as if he'd been waiting. You're coming with me to my grandmother's birthday. Emma froze. Mrs. Grant's birthday? Her heart skipped. She'd been to the Grant house before, back when she was still Peter's fiancé. Now she would return under an entirely different identity. She hesitated. Aidan, Before she could finish, he cut her off. Are you planning to call me that at the party? Emma blinked. Then, what should I call you? Aidan's gaze held hers, unreadable. Honey. Her breath caught. Honey? She echoed, cheeks flushing pink. Her hands trembled slightly as she fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. Aidan looked away, jaw tightening. Chris will pick you up after your appointment and take you straight to the Grant house, he said. Emma could only nod. She had no right to say no. But instead of going to physiotherapy, Emma made her way to Columbus Circle. She wanted to buy a gift for Mrs. Grant, something thoughtful, even if modest. After browsing several stores, her eyes landed on a display scarf, elegant, silk, wrapped delicately in a glass case. I'd like to see that one, please, Emma said, pointing. The shop assistant looked her up and down, clearly unimpressed. It's designer, $1,000. Please don't touch it unless you're sure. Emma smiled faintly and reached out to examine the fabric anyway. Before she could say anything more, her phone rang. Chris, I'm at the mall, she said softly. Then she turned back to the shop assistant. Please wrap it up carefully. The woman, now realizing Emma was serious, silently did as asked. Emma paid with her card, took the delicate box, and stepped outside just in time to see Chris pulling up at the curb. Sorry to keep you waiting, she said as she hurried over. Chris gave her a glance and noticed the gift bag. He raised an eyebrow. Just got here. Back at the apartment, Emma returned to her room to change while Chris stepped into the study. Aidan, still reviewing documents, didn't look up. Fetch the tin of Earl Grey I got from that specialty shop, he said. It'll be Grandma's gift. Chris hesitated. Aidan, Emma didn't go to physiotherapy today. She went shopping. Aidan paused, finally setting his pen down. She bought a gift? Chris nodded. Aidan was silent for a moment, his fingers tapping the desk in a slow rhythm. Put the tea in the car now, he said. Give it to Grandma after dinner. Don't let Emma see it. Understood. Chris left the study, retrieved the elegant tin from the cabinet, and walked into the living room, only to run into Emma. She blinked at him. Heading out already? Just putting something in the car, he said, trying to sound casual. Aiden's still working, so we might be a bit late. Emma glanced at the box in his hands. It was beautifully wrapped and emitted a delicate floral scent. Before she could ask, Chris added, "It's a box of tea leaves." "There's a weird smell in my car. I thought this might help." Emma smiled, completely unaware. "Makes sense. It smells lovely." She turned and went back to her room. Chris exhaled in relief. Let's hope this little cover story holds up. Chris let out a quiet sigh of relief and hurried to the car with the gift box, unaware of the tension that was quietly building. During the ride to the Grant family estate, Emma sat quietly, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her dress. She couldn't shake the overwhelming anxiety rising in her chest. The closer they got, the more she wanted to turn back. As if sensing her thoughts, Aiden said calmly, "I heard Peter will be bringing Alicia along tonight." Emma wasn't surprised that Aiden knew. What caught her off guard was how quickly he had figured out what would shake her confidence. With Peter and Alicia now publicly a couple, Emma knew there would be many more uncomfortable encounters like this. Avoiding this one would only make future ones harder. Still, she couldn't stop fidgeting. Once Aiden was sure she was mentally prepared, he nodded to Chris, who stepped out and began helping Aiden from the car. Emma followed, carefully carrying the birthday gift she had chosen, but just as she stepped onto the cobbled drive, a sharp voice called from behind. "Emma, what are you doing here?" Emma turned and saw Alicia approaching, dressed in a bold, shimmering gown and wearing a look of shock and disdain. "I'm here to celebrate Mrs. Grant's birthday," Emma replied calmly, not even blinking. Just then, Chris rolled Aiden forward to stand beside her. Alicia's eyes moved from Emma to Aiden. She paused, then suddenly burst into mocking laughter. "Don't tell me. You're really showing up here with your wheelchair husband, trying to make Peter jealous?" Emma's eyes flared with indignation. "Alicia, you've gone too far." But Alicia only scoffed and turned toward the grand entrance with her chin held high. "Embarrass yourself if you want. I won't stop you." After she disappeared inside, Emma looked down, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. Then Aiden's voice, calm and low, broke through her thoughts. "Well done." Emma looked at him, uncertain. "Will I embarrass you if we go in together like this?" Aiden reached out and gently took her hand. "We're husband and wife, aren't we?" he said softly. "Let's go." The warmth of his touch calmed her heart. His lips curled into a faint smile, and even his normally cool expression softened. Inside the elegant Grant family estate, old Mrs. Grant sat restlessly on a lavish couch. Dressed in deep crimson with strands of pearls, she looked regal but impatient. "Are they here yet?" she asked. "I already called Chris," Leslie Grant, Aiden's aunt, replied from beside her. "He said they're on their way." "Did he bring his special one?" the older woman pressed. Chris said yes. Without another word, Mrs. Grant stood up abruptly. "Mum, take it easy," Leslie called after her, hurrying to support her as they headed toward the entrance. Just then, Alicia strutted into the foyer with her assistant, spotting Peter chatting confidently among a group of wealthy guests. Her face lit up with satisfaction. Everything is going perfectly. She noticed Mrs. Grant walking in her direction and beamed. She must be coming to greet me. With great enthusiasm, Alicia stepped forward. "Mrs. Grant, happy birthday. I hope you have many, many more. I even brought you a custom necklace from Wise Jewelers." She lifted the gift box proudly, but Mrs. Grant barely looked at her. Without stopping, she gently pushed past Alicia and headed straight for the man in the wheelchair. "I thought you'd try to avoid today," she said, with a teasing smile. Aiden's lips curved faintly. "I wouldn't miss my favorite grandmother's birthday." Still know how to charm an old lady, huh? She laughed softly. Then she spotted Emma. The old woman's eyes lingered for a beat too long, clearly surprised, but then her expression melted into a warm smile. Emma, you're here too. Emma offered the gift with both hands. Happy birthday, Mrs. Grant. I wish you good health and happiness. My dear, just your presence is enough, the woman replied, though she took the gift graciously. She leaned over and whispered to Aidan, Explain everything later. He nodded. Alicia, now standing awkwardly to the side, was beginning to realize something was off. Who was that man? Peter finally joined them, eyes locking on Aidan and Emma holding hands. A flicker of emotion passed through him, but he quickly masked it with a smile. Big brother, long time no see. Emma froze at the sound of Peter's voice, but Aidan tightened his grip on her hand. Long time, Aidan replied coolly. Alicia's eyes widened. Aidan? Aidan Grant? She had heard the rumors. After a car accident 3 years ago, the Grant family's eldest son had all but vanished from the public eye. And now, she had just insulted him. She quickly stepped over and clung to Peter's arm, trying to recover. Peter, playing along, wrapped an arm around her waist and turned to his grandmother. Grandma, this is my girlfriend, Alicia. Mrs. Grant's expression didn't change. Thank you, she said politely. Alicia beamed and handed over the gift box. I hope you'll like it. Leslie, please take it, Mrs. Grant said, evenly. The woman in white stepped forward to accept the box. Peter glanced between the two women, his grandmother holding Emma's gift personally, while Leslie held Alicia's. His jaw tensed. He forced a smile. Grandma, Alicia is your real granddaughter-in-law now. She even picked your gift from Wise Jewelers. Mrs. Grant's eyes flicked toward Alicia, then back to Peter. Don't worry, I know who belongs in this family, she said dryly. Then, with no further comment, she turned to Aidan. You, come with me. Leslie, show Emma where the rest of the party is. Leslie gave Emma a look that was far from warm. Emma hesitated, glancing at Aidan. He nodded slightly. Emma followed Leslie without another word, while Peter and Alicia were left standing awkwardly in the hallway, completely ignored. Here comes the end of Season 1. If you're interested in Season 2, comment I'm interested in Season 2.